There is a silent power that a woman discovers when she no longer seeks validation from the man she desires. And this power is not loud. It doesn't scream. It doesn't chase. It doesn't plead. It simply exists, softly, gracefully, yet unshakably. It is the power of inner worth. And when a man feels it, he cannot help but be drawn in, not by control, but by the magnetic pull of a woman who is whole without him. You don't need to wound his pride with harsh words or manipulation. That's not where your strength lies. The moment you stop trying to impress him and instead fall deeply, fully in love with yourself, something inside him begins to shift. He may not know why, but suddenly he's thinking about you when he wakes up. He finds himself remembering the way you smiled, the way you carried yourself. He notices how you no longer orbit around his world. And that is exactly what starts to shatter his pride, not through pain, but through absence. Through the contrast between your presence and your detachment. Louise Hay teaches that every thought we think is creating our future. So imagine what happens when you replace the thought, "I need him to want me," with "I am already deeply loved by the universe." Your vibration changes, your energy becomes sovereign, and he feels it, maybe not in words, but he feels the gap where your approval used to be. He senses the calm certainty that now lives in your eyes. And it unsettles him in the most beautiful way, because now he realizes you don't need him to feel valuable, and that is when you become irresistible. A man's pride is often built on how much influence he thinks he has over you. But when you take your focus off of him and turn it inward, when you begin affirming yourself, loving yourself, nurturing your heart, his influence over you starts to crumble. Not because you pushed him away, but because you reclaimed your center. Pride begins to melt when presence is no longer guaranteed. This is not about revenge. This is not about playing games. This is about returning to the truth of who you are. Worthy, divine, whole. And from that truth, you don't need to convince anyone to love you. Instead, you allow the universe to bring to you those who are ready to meet you at that level. And if he is one of them, his heart will soften. He will love you in a way he never has before. Not from ego, but from awe. When you stop reacting to his distance or his silence, and instead choose peace, you interrupt the pattern that his pride depends on. He expects you to chase, to question, to prove. But you don't. You choose stillness. You choose your breath. You choose to heal the parts of you that once believed you had to earn love. And that inner shift creates an external ripple. He notices the silence. He feels the space. And within that space, he begins to reflect, maybe even regret. Louise always said, "You've been criticizing yourself for years and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens." And when you do, your whole world changes. You stop making his behavior mean something about you. You stop needing his attention to feel seen. You begin to live, not for his affection, but from your own alignment. And that is the moment the dynamic between you and him begins to transform. There's something deeply unnerving to a man when the woman he once took for granted no longer places him at the center of her world. And yet, there's something breathtakingly beautiful when he realizes that he still wants to be part of it. Not because he feels superior, but because he knows now that her love is a gift, not a guarantee. When you nourish yourself, when you care for your inner child, when you hold your emotions with gentleness instead of judgment, you begin to radiate a kind of warmth that no performance can imitate. And a man, any man, who has even the smallest capacity to love deeply, will feel that warmth, and he will move closer. Not because he wants to control you, but because he is inspired by you. He may not say it out loud, but he will start showing up more. He will initiate conversations. He will want to understand you in ways he never did before, because something has changed. You no longer play small. You no longer shrink to make him comfortable. You've stepped into your light, and he now wants to feel the sun again. That is how you shatter pride, not with confrontation but with evolution. not with anger, but with self-love. You become the mirror that reflects everything he is afraid to face, and also everything he hopes to find. And as you continue to embody this gentle but firm power, something even more profound begins to unfold, not just in him, but in you. You no longer crave his attention the way you once did. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you've remembered that your value doesn't rise and fall with his actions. You've reclaimed your sense of self. And that reclamation is quietly revolutionary. He starts to notice that he can no longer predict you. The woman who once responded to every message in seconds now takes her time. The woman who used to apologize just to keep the peace now chooses silence when silence feels more peaceful. You're not punishing him. You're simply no longer overextending yourself to maintain a connection that isn't being nurtured equally. That difference becomes magnetic and confusing and compelling. Louise Hay often spoke about how our outer world is a reflection of our inner dialogue. And when your inner dialogue shifts from, "Am I enough for him?" to "I am enough for me," the entire vibration of your presence changes. You become a sanctuary for your own heart, a safe space for your own dreams. And that kind of woman, she becomes unforgettable, not because she tries to be, but because she is deeply at home within herself. He may even begin to test your shift. He might withdraw to see if you chase. He might poke at old wounds to see if you react the same, but you won't, because this version of you has healed, not perfectly, not completely, but enough to no longer engage in the cycles that once drained you. You recognize the test for what it is, a reflection of his own insecurity, not your worth. And slowly, his pride starts to crack. Not through dramatic confrontation, but through your unwavering calm, through your unshakable joy, through your ability to smile without needing him to give you a reason. That kind of emotional independence isn't something he can ignore. It doesn't compete. It doesn't control. It simply shines, and it forces him to look at himself. That's when the real transformation begins, not just in how he sees you, but in how he sees love. He realizes love isn't about possession. It's about presence. It's about partnership. And he begins to wonder how he could step into that space with you again, but differently this time, with intention, with vulnerability, with awe. Louise believed that when we change our thoughts, we literally change our lives. And so as you stop feeding the story that says you need to earn love, and start nourishing the truth that you are already love itself, you radiate a frequency that calls in not just his attention, but his admiration, his respect, his genuine desire to grow. A man cannot love you deeply while he's still addicted to pride. But when that pride is gently disarmed by your grace, by your boundaries, by your light, he begins to see love as something sacred, not something to conquer. He begins to desire a deeper connection, not just with you, but with his own heart. And that is the kind of love that lasts. He won't always understand what's happening. He may feel confused, pulled, even afraid, because this new energy you're embodying doesn't fit the old patterns. It doesn't fit into the box of easy or available or predictable. You've stepped out of that box. You've stepped into your truth. And now if he wants to be close to you, he has to rise to meet you there. He has to let go of the version of you that existed when you doubted yourself, when you waited, when you clung, because that version no longer lives here. What lives here now is a woman who has chosen herself, who walks in alignment, who knows that love is not something you beg for, but something you allow from those who are willing to meet you in truth. And in that shift, he feels the loss, not of you entirely, but of the version of you that once placed him on a pedestal. And that loss awakens a longing, a desire not just to have you, but to deserve you. And if he is ready, he will begin the journey back to you, not as the man who once needed to dominate, but as the man who now wants to truly connect. And while he quietly wrestles with the echo of your absence, you are not waiting. You are blooming. You're pouring your energy into the parts of your life that once sat quietly in the shadows, neglected in the name of love. Now your time is sacred. Your boundaries are clearer. You listen to your intuition more than his opinions. And this evolution, it's not loud or dramatic, but it's undeniable. The more you detach from his need to feel powerful through your reactions, the more he begins to feel powerless in his old ways of relating. He's no longer the center of your emotional universe, and that, for a man rooted in pride, is deeply unsettling. Not because you've turned cold, but because you've turned inward. And that shift makes him question everything he thought he knew about connection. He thought you needed him to feel seen. He thought your love was a guarantee. But now he sees that your love is a conscious choice, not a response to his approval, not a reaction to his validation, but a gift that flows from your own fullness. And that realization begins to melt the walls he once built to protect his ego. Louise Hay always reminded us that self-approval is the foundation of healing, and that includes emotional healing, the kind that makes you no longer abandon yourself just to be chosen. You're no longer shrinking, you're expanding. And in that expansion you become more radiant, more grounded, more magnetic than ever. Your silence doesn't punish him, it teaches him. It shows him what life feels like without your softness, your presence, your laughter. He remembers the ease with which you used to forgive, the way you used to prioritize him, the warmth in your words. And he starts to realize that none of it was owed to him. It was your essence. And now, it's being protected. This isn't about playing hard to get. This is about becoming hard to forget. And the reason he can't stop thinking about you now isn't because you're trying harder. It's because you're trying less. You've redirected all the energy you once gave him into healing your heart, growing your purpose, nourishing your spirit. And that transformation is visible. Even if he only sees it in glimpses, he feels it in full. His pride begins to crumble, not because you attack it, but because your growth makes it irrelevant. He can no longer lean on your insecurities to feel strong. He can no longer count on your fears to control the dynamic. The woman standing in front of him now is not the same woman he met. She's wiser, softer, stronger. She doesn't seek revenge. She seeks alignment. And in that alignment, his own reflection begins to change. He may not have been ready before. He may have taken you for granted. But now, he sees the difference between attention and presence, between attraction and admiration. And admiration, that is what grows in the space where pride once lived. It's not that you've stopped loving him. It's that you've stopped abandoning yourself in the name of that love. That's the difference. You can still love him, still wish him well, but you no longer need to lose parts of yourself to keep him close. That's the kind of clarity that pierces through ego like light through fog. And if he has any capacity to evolve, this clarity will awaken something dormant in him. Perhaps for the first time he begins to feel what you felt all along, the ache of being unseen, unheard, misunderstood. He remembers the moments when you needed him to be present and he chose distance. And now, that distance is his. Not because you pushed him away, but because you walked back home to yourself. And that walk, it's slow, sacred, intentional. Every step you take away from needing his approval is a step closer to your own power. And as Louise Hay would say, when you align with love, everything else begins to realign. Your energy becomes a beacon, not of desperation, but of truth. And truth always calls in what's meant for you. And as your truth deepens, something even more precious begins to happen. You begin to feel safe within yourself. Not because someone else finally showed up, but because you did. You begin to realize that the safest place you can ever be is inside your own love. That's where your true power lives. That's what begins to replace the old ache, the old longing, the old desperation for someone to validate you. You wake up in the morning and you no longer check your phone hoping to see his name. You check in with yourself. You ask, what do I need today to feel nourished? You move through the day with more softness, more trust, more presence. The space that he used to occupy in your mind is now filled with dreams, with visions, with peace. And that peace is magnetic. Because real peace is rare, especially in a world addicted to chaos and craving attention. You don't announce your evolution. You embody it, You don't need him to see the change to validate that it's real. You see it, you feel it. That's enough. And from this place, you start to make decisions not from fear of losing him, but from love for yourself. You no longer say yes when your body says no. You no longer tolerate breadcrumbs just to feel chosen. You've tasted your own worth now, and you're not willing to starve again. What begins to collapse in him isn't just pride. It's the illusion of control. He realizes he can't predict you anymore. He can't push the same buttons and get the same reaction. You've disarmed the game, not by playing it better, but by stepping out of it completely. And that's what haunts his thoughts. That's what keeps him coming back to your energy, trying to understand how he lost access to something he once took for granted. He doesn't miss who you were. He misses who he was when he felt powerful through your insecurities. Now he has to meet you in your wholeness. And that terrifies him, because true connection asks him to be vulnerable, to be real, to admit he wants to be seen too. And for a man who has used pride as armor, that kind of intimacy can feel like exposure. But your energy, now rooted in softness and self-respect, creates a safety that begins to invite him into something deeper. Not because you coax him, not because you convince him, but because you are that safe space. He feels it in your presence, in your stillness, in your refusal to perform, in your calm confidence that says, "I am love," whether you see it or not. This isn't just about him falling in love with you. It's about him falling in love with the real you, the you that no longer edits herself, the you that no longer seeks permission to shine, the you that lives from her heart, not from her wounds. That version of you isn't just lovable. She is unforgettable, because she doesn't chase, she attracts, not with effort, but with essence. You've shattered the pedestal he put himself on, not by dragging him down, but by rising. And now, if he wants to be part of your world again, he has to meet you where you are. He has to let go of ego and meet you with soul. That's the new requirement. That's the new vibration. And the door to your heart is no longer open to half love. You've become a mirror now, a mirror that reflects not just what he wants to see, but what he needs to heal. And that reflection will either break him open or push him away. Either way, you no longer compromise your light to keep him comfortable. You've chosen expansion over familiarity. And the universe always supports that choice. And as he stands at the edge of his comfort, looking back at the woman who once gave so freely, he begins to understand something he never grasped before. Love is not owed, and presence is not permanent. He starts to notice the moments where he expected you to bend, to explain, to fix things. But this time, you don't. You stay rooted in your silence, not out of anger, but out of peace. And that peace becomes the loudest sound in his world. You are no longer a source of reaction. You are a reflection of truth. You've become the quiet invitation for him to evolve, to soften, to grow. But you're no longer waiting to see if he does. You've detached from the outcome, not because you don't care, but because you finally care enough about yourself. That shift is what dismantles the need for validation. You've made yourself the center of your own universe, and that universe is blooming in ways you never imagined. You begin to attract new experiences, new conversations, even new people, those who meet you with reverence instead of resistance. And suddenly he feels the gap again, the one you've gently widened with every self-affirming decision. He may try to close that gap by doing what he's always done, throwing breadcrumbs, making vague promises, reaching out when he senses you're moving on. But you don't bite, not out of spite, out of clarity, because clarity has become your new standard. Clarity about what you want, clarity about how you deserve to be treated. And most importantly, clarity about who you are when you're not chasing, fixing, or proving. This version of you doesn't need a man's confusion to feel valuable. She lives in her own certainty. She walks in her own rhythm, and that rhythm no longer dances to the beat of his inconsistency. What begins to shatter inside him now isn't just pride, it's the story he told himself about love. The belief that he could always come and go, that your heart would always be open, that your energy would always be available. He starts to realize that love is not about possession, it's about participation. and he hasn't been participating, not in the way that counts. Louise Hay would remind you, the thoughts we choose are the tools we use to paint the canvas of our life. And now, you're painting in bold colours, no longer grey, no longer muted. Your boundaries are brushstrokes. Your joy is the light. Your forgiveness is the warmth in every corner. But you no longer use your love to fix others. You use it to fuel your own path. And he sees it. Maybe too late, maybe just in time. The woman he once thought he could keep waiting is now leading herself forward, not with resentment but with grace, not with revenge but with expansion. And this expansion leaves no room for pride-based love, only for soul-based connection. He begins to question the version of himself he's been offering. And in that questioning, he begins to feel the pull, not of your need, but of your wholeness. He can feel that you're no longer operating from a place of emptiness. You've filled your own cup. And now you don't need a relationship to complete you, you want one to complement you. And that difference creates a standard he's never met before. One that doesn't bend for comfort. One that doesn't shrink for fear of being alone. One that holds space, but only for what is real. He's no longer sure of his place in your life. And that uncertainty is the very thing he used to weaponize against you. Now it's unraveling his defenses. Now it's making him reflect in silence. Now it's pushing him to ask himself, can I love her without needing to control her? Can I show up without pride standing between us? Can I meet her at the level she now lives at? And while he figures that out, you continue forward, not looking back, not holding your breath. You're too focused on what's blooming ahead. You're too in love with your own healing to settle for anything less than real. So, while he lingers in the echoes of the past, you keep choosing yourself. With every breath, every decision, every boundary, you reaffirm what you now know deeply, that real love doesn't come from pride, from fear, or from control. Real love grows in truth. It rises when two whole beings choose each other freely, not because they need to be saved, but because they want to be seen. You've become the embodiment of self-respect, of softness with strength, of compassion without self-betrayal. And whether he returns transformed or fades into memory, you know your worth is no longer negotiable. That, beautiful soul, is the revolution. That is how you shatter pride, not through force, but through evolution. Not by breaking him, but by rising so fully that he must choose, grow or watch you walk away. And now I want to ask you, yes, you who are listening with your heart open and your soul ready to rise, if this message touched something deep inside you, if it reminded you of your own power, your own truth, your own worth, share it. Someone out there is still chasing what they should be choosing within. Someone out there is still confusing pride for love. And your simple action, liking, commenting, or sharing, might be the spark that changes everything for her. Tell me below, what part of you are you finally ready to choose? What version of you are you ready to protect, to nurture, to celebrate? I read each word you write with love and presence, and this space we're creating together, it's sacred. Let's walk this path together. Let's rise in love, not for anyone else, but for ourselves. And in doing so, may we inspire others to do the same. Share this video, leave your experience in the comments, subscribe if this energy nourishes you, and above all, remember, the love you are searching for out there already lives within you. You are simply awakening to it.